Hi, everybody. This is Eric Murray from the sugarhuddle.com. This is my second video. Every week I'm going to be previewing each NFL division. And this week I'm going to do the NFC West to start off. It's been one of the tougher divisions in football the last several years. This year's going to be interesting because we really don't know if the Seahawks or the Cardinals are going to be any good for that matter. Both of them have a chance to finish below 500. That's where I've predicted them, but they both also could possibly make a playoff run. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And then, of course, you have the Niners, who have been in the cellar of the division the last few years, but now they're the trendy pick to, maybe if not win the division, I mean, at least be a playoff team and possibly make some noise with Jimmy G and company. And then the Rams, they could be the class of the NFL in general. So it's going to be a very, very interesting division. But I just wanted to, make a quick video previewing the NFC West, and I'll do a video each week for each division. I've already written a preview for each of the four teams, four separate previews on the sugarhuddle.com. So make sure you go to the sugarhuddle.com and check that out. And then, of course, this YouTube channel, just simply named Eric Murray. Starting out, looking at the Rams, 11-5 last year, it's really amazing their turnaround, because you had this team that for the last several years in St. Louis, they were a dumpster fire. First year in LA in 2016 was a disaster. Jeff Fisher had been their head coach for, I think he ended up lasting like 7 seasons, which is amazing for a, career 7-9 coach, quote unquote. But of course that kind of continued under Fisher, because they had a strong defense for a number of years, but I mean the offense was something that seemed like it's from the Stone Age. Everybody said it was kind of like an offense out of 1995. It's something that he'd been running since he got his first job, which was with the Houston Oilers as an interim coach back in '94, and it just felt like all these years he never really changed his offense. Pretty predictable, and the Rams, of course, haven't had a legit franchise quarterback a number of years. Sam Bradford, who they took number 1 overall in 2010, of course wasn't the guy that they thought he'd be, and he's been kind of bouncing around as a journeyman now. Ironically, he's actually with the Cardinals now, so he's back in the division, and we'll get to him in a little bit. But looking at the Rams, I know a lot of people are high on the Niners, but I just think the Rams, with the offseason they've had, and you think about they gave up their first-round pick to get Brandon Cooks from the Patriots, and all he did was have the best year of his career in New England last year. He's a speedster, but he has good hands. There's a lot of speedy receivers that they just have speed, and they're not great route runners. They don't have great hands, but Brandon Cooks is a legit player, and pairing him with Jared Goff is big. Remember they had Sammy Watkins last year, and Sammy didn't really have that great of a year, and he got the big contract to go to Kansas City, and that wasn't really much of a loss for the Rams. And then, of course, Tavon Austin, who's been a huge disappointment since being the 8th overall pick in 2013, got that big contract from the Rams for some reason, which made no sense, and then they actually traded him to Dallas this offseason. He was seldom used last year. So they need that speed element. They've got the possession guy in Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp is also basically a possession-type guy that has a little bit of speed to him. But really that big difference maker down the seams, and that's Brandon Cooks. And, the Rams have had as strong of an offseason as anybody when you think about it, because they give Ndamukong Suh a 1-year deal. And remember, you have the Defensive Player of the Year and defensive tackle Aaron Donald, and Suh, who the Rams almost drafted number 1 overall back in that 2010 Sam Bradford draft. Now all of a sudden you have those two guys on your defensive line. You got Robert Quinn. You got some excellent depth. You still got Wade Phillips. You got really good linebackers. You look at the secondary. You get Aqib Talib and trying to blank on his name right now. Marcus Peters. I mean, Marcus Peters, been in the league a few years now. He's been just absolutely amazing, but his problem, like Aqib Talib, is that he's a head case. He's somebody that the Chiefs really started having some issues with last year, and he had that bizarre incident where he threw the penalty flag in that game. I think it was at the Jets, believe he ended up getting suspended a game. And for Kansas City, a guy that's as talented as he is and the production he's had the last couple of years, for them to trade him away just kind of tells you that he's got issues. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he was kicked off the University of Washington, and people were kind of surprised that he still went in the first round to the Chiefs. So this is a guy that's had a infamous history, and it's the same with like Aqib Talib. He had problems at Kansas, still got drafted by the Bucks, I believe, late first round. He's a guy that he's not afraid to get in people's faces, and he kind of mixed it up in Tampa, New England, and especially Denver, and Denver kind of felt like they needed to move on from him. He had really wore out his welcome and got into a couple scuffles with Michael Crabtree. He was still with the Raiders at the time. But, you figure, these are guys that, you basically just have them around for 1 year. If they can get their act together for 1 year, change the scenery, a no BS coach and Wade Phillips as your defensive coordinator, for 1 year, they've got a shot to really make a run at this thing. So I really think the Rams are going to win the division again. 11-5 last year. They could be as high as 14-2 this year. I'm going to go a little bit conservative and say 12-4, but that'll probably be good enough for the 2 seed in the NFC, and I think they have a great shot to make a Super Bowl run. I'll eventually make a video right before the season with all my playoff predictions once I get through all these divisional previews. But at the very least, what I'll tell you is that they're going to be the 2 seed in the NFC, 12-4. They're going to win the West, and that's all I'll say for now. But they're definitely going to be right there, even the NFC being the better conference. The Rams are going to be right there. And you think about Jared Goff, it's amazing. You go from this pretty overrated coach and Jeff Fisher, who can't really develop offenses and quarterbacks. And, Goff had this disastrous rookie year in 2016 after going number 1 overall. Was 0-7, I believe, and was a nightmare season. And then all of a sudden, Sean McVay comes in. He's this wonder boy offensive coordinator from the Redskins. He's only 30 years old. A lot of people are saying, oh, this isn't going to work. And we've seen these young coaches like Josh McDaniels and Lane Kiffin. McVay comes in, and he's just been unbelievable. He's just finds a way to really connect with the players. A lot of that's because of his age, but apparently, he's keeping them in line, and he's got really good assistant coaches. And at the end of the day, this is an offense. They went from the worst scoring offense in 16 to the best in 17. You talk about a turnaround. That's results right there. And, it's kind of starting a little bit of a revolution, because you think about, more teams are starting to look at the really young head coaches again. They're not as wary after the Kiffin and McDaniels debacles, because now they saw what, is happening with McVay, and so they're trying to get in on it. And I think it was Chicago. They signed Matt Nagy, who was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. So yeah, there's teams that are starting to look at these young coaches again and say, you know what, maybe let's give them another shot. But McVay, he did an unbelievable job. The offense just lit it up. Goff was a Pro Bowler. And think about Todd Gurley, arguably the best running back in the NFL. Obviously, there's a couple other guys that can make a claim, but definitely a top 3 running back, a guy that is amongst the best players in football. He was unbelievable at Georgia, and here he was coming in the NFL, 10th overall pick, 2015. No quarterback, bad offense, bad football team. St. Louis with Jeff Fisher still there as a head coach, and he got off to a great start his rookie year, and then injuries kind of set in. But not a great offensive line, no passing game. For him to have a rookie year he had was impressive. And then a lot of people wrote him off after 2016. But again, no quarterback, not a great coach. No offense to speak of. What did you expect him to do? 2017 comes around, and he rushed for, I believe, 1,300 plus yards, had over 2,000 scrimmage yards, 19 total touchdowns. His first 2 years in the league, he had 2,500 yards and 16 total touchdowns his first 2 years. So you talk about a breakout third year, and I believe that with the offense that the LA Rams have, I think he's going to have a chance to have another big year. He was kind of in the MVP mix, and Goff was kind of a dark horse, and both of them are going to have a chance to really shine again this year, and definitely be in consideration at least for Offensive Player of the Year. So I look at what the Rams have defensively with the move they made, and then you add Cooks to the offense. I mean, this is going to be a tough team to beat, and that's why I think it's going to be tough for the 49ers because, you look at San Fran, they had been stellar the last few years after inexplicably running Jim Harbaugh out of town. Finally, you get a guy that you believe in Kyle Shanahan as your head coach. You take a shot with John Lynch as your GM, and so far it's paid off, and especially that highway robbery of a trade to get Jimmy Garoppolo mid-season last year, and then goes 5-0 to end the year. His only 5 started in San Fran. He's now 7-0 for his career. This was a team that was 1-10, started I think it was 0-9 to begin the year, but anyways 1-10, and they finished 6-10, and now everybody says they're going to win 10 plus games, and they're going to go to the playoffs, and they're going to make all this noise, and it's only a matter of time before Garoppolo is perhaps the best quarterback in the NFL. It's hard to disagree with any of that, and I wouldn't be shocked if they go to the playoffs this year, but I just have a feeling that they're going to come up a little bit short. I mean, they've had a strong offseason like the Rams. You get Richard Sherman for pennies on the dollar, an incentive-laden deal, and you just think about some of these other moves that they've been able to make, and again, it's hard to really say, well, I don't know about the 49ers, but again, that's a division you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I didn't predict Seattle or Arizona to do anything, but they're going to be a tough out when you have to play those two teams 4 times a year, and then the 2 games with the Rams. So those 6 division games are probably going to decide whether the Niners make the playoffs or not, because I think they're when you look at their other 10 games or non-divisional schedule, it's manageable enough that they could have possibly a winning record there, but even though they've got tough games, they got like 5 primetime games, but I still think the division's what it's going to be about, and if they go like 500 in their division, that might not be enough. So I just think that they're kind of looking like an 8-8 type of team. I just think that everybody kind of automatically assumes they're going to make the playoffs this year, but this is a team that had a rough secondary, and they get Sherman, but they still have a lot of young guys there. The front seven's getting a lot better, but they still need to really continue to work on their pass rush and some different things. And so I think 8-8 is probably where they're at, because Garoppolo seems like a guy that has ice water in his veins like Brady, but at the same time, I mean, he got this big contract after just 7 career starts, and everybody's saying, no, he's the next big thing, and this Niners team, it's playoffs or bust, and that might just be a little bit too much for him and for the 49ers as a whole. There's still some question marks with their running game, so you wonder, is the offense going to be balanced? And Garoppolo, he didn't exactly put up gaudy numbers, even though he went 5-0. He had the 2 fourth quarter comebacks, which were great, but he had 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in those 5 starts, 260 yards per game. So that's hardly setting the world on fire. I still think he's a hell of a quarterback, but nonetheless, you're going to have to do more than that over the course of a 16-game season. And so I'm just wondering if defensively they're still going to have some holes in that secondary. Richard Sherman, is coming off of that Achilles injury, and remember, I mean, he was showing some decline even before the injury. So I'm just thinking that 8-8 is probably where they're at. Again, 5 primetime games. I'm just wondering if the pressure is going to be a little bit too much for them this year, and with the Rams being virtually unbeatable, and not really knowing what the Seahawks and Cardinals are going to do, because they could be a lot better than my predictions I'm about to talk about. They could both be winning teams. So you could have a division where everybody's 8-8 or better. And so that might just be enough to keep the Niners out of the playoffs. So I wouldn't be shocked if they go 10-6, make the playoffs, and Jimmy G possibly goes to the Pro Bowl. But I don't know. I just keep thinking that 8-8, 2019 is really when you're going to start to see them take off. But I just have a feeling that this year they're just going to come up a little bit short, particularly in division games, and that'll be enough to keep them out. So I'll go 8-8 and say that they're second place in the division. Now the Seahawks and the Cardinals are interesting because both of them had disappointing years last year, but they still finished 8-8 or better. The Cardinals were 8-8, third place. Seahawks were 9-7, but Seahawks had a rough offseason. They were looking into getting rid of Richard Sherman. They cut him loose. They traded away Michael Bennett. Cliff Averill, another guy whose career was kind of getting to the end there with that neck injury. Get rid of him, and then Cam Chancellor has to retire because of his neck problems. So it's like the Legion of Boom and that great defense is starting to unravel, and they had a nice draft, but they just I think they didn't really add enough this offseason, and again, they really don't have the cap space, but they didn't add enough this offseason to make you really feel that great about their defense. So I think their defense is going to be kind of in a rebuild. I think defensively they're going to have to they're probably going to take a step back, and they're going to have to play a lot of young guys, including some of those rookies. And then offensively, that's a big thing, is they've had a bad offensive line for the last several years. Russell Wilson has done some unbelievable things behind that line, but you just wonder. I mean, 6 years in the league, he hasn't missed a game yet, but with his style of play, you just wonder if this is a year where he unfortunately gets hurt. And if he gets hurt, whether it's 3 or 4 games or more, that's going to be enough to keep the Seahawks out of the playoffs, because they're a borderline playoff team at best. They're going to be lucky to replicate 9-7. I actually have them going 6-10 because I just kind of feel that even though they got a lot of the distractions and quote unquote head cases out of the locker room, mainly guys like Sherman and Bennett with some of their antics, but even getting those guys out of the locker room, you're getting a lot younger on defense, and you just wonder how these pieces are going to come together. You never know about injuries, but going back to the offensive line, they drafted one offensive lineman. That was day 3. They just really have not been able to do anything to really fix this offensive line. It's still a mess. Again, you don't know about Wilson's health. And remember, it was a little bit of an awkward offseason because Wilson's going to be free agent soon, and the Seahawks were showing kind of an unusual amount of interest in Wyoming quarterback Josh Allen, who ended up going 7th overall to the Bills. And there was some, things said about that, and it was, I don't know, it was just a little bit of a weird situation. And there's questions now about, are the Seahawks going to, make an attempt to re-sign Wilson with the kind of money he's going to command? So there's just some weird stuff internally that's kind of going on in Seattle. And we don't have an offensive line, which is naturally going to affect the running game. I mean, they've got some pretty good backs in the backfield. They just drafted Rashad Penny out of San Diego State in the first round. He's a talented guy. A couple other talented guys there, like Chris Carson. But I just feel like this is kind of, last year was like the beginning of the end, the way it finished. And I think it's just going to eventually turn into a rebuild in Seattle, with or without Russell Wilson. I think it's going to turn into a rebuild. I just think that you've got no running game. You don't know if Wilson, who gets sacked all the time, 43 sacks last year, even with his mobility, can he stay afloat? Defensively, it seems like it's a rebuild. Pete Carroll, great coach, but it seems like maybe the message has been lost. This is going to be his, I believe he started in 2010, so this would be his 9th year. And a lot of times, when these NFL coaches, they get beyond 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes the players stop listening to them. And that's kind of what people had said about guys like Michael Bennett and Richard Sherman, that maybe some of these veteran guys kind of stopped listening to them. They got rid of those guys, but nonetheless, now you have all these younger guys. You question the depth. So I think this could be a fall-apart year. I think that, hopefully it doesn't happen to him, but I think Wilson will probably finally get injured and miss games for the first time in his career, like 3 or 4 games, and that'll be enough to set him back. Don't really have a whole lot, at quarterback beyond him. So, I think 6-10. I think they're going to be disappointing. I think with the Niners' emergence, they'll at least split with the Seahawks. I could easily see the Rams sweeping them, so that right there, that's 1-3 in the division. And then, if you only split with the Cardinals, that's 2-4. So outside of the division, to get to 10 wins, you're going to have to go 8-2, and even 9-7. You have to go 7-3 outside of the division. I just don't see that happening. So, yeah, I think they're going to fall apart. A lot of it won't be Wilson's fault, but I think they're just going to fall apart and be 6-10. And then finally, the Cardinals. Cardinals, another team that you look at them and say, they could be 8-8, could be 9-7, could be, barely make or barely miss the playoffs. But I'm thinking this is going to be a rebuild, and it might not be a long-term rebuild. It might just be a one-year thing. But I'm thinking that this year is going to be a rebuild. It's going to be a 5-11 season. That's what I'm predicting. I just got a new head coach. You've got new quarterbacks. You lose arguably the heart and soul of your defense in Tyrann Mathieu, who signs a one-year deal, and Houston, one-year prove-it deal. It's just a new era for the Cardinals. You've got this rookie head coach, Steve Wilks, did a great job with the Carolina Panthers, beat the Cardinals in the NFC Championship game a few years ago, but he's a rookie head coach, and he's a defensive-minded guy. So he's a younger guy, but you just wonder, a lot of defensive-minded head coaches, sometimes they're kind of stuck in the past. They're conservative in the sense that they just want to play great defense and run the football, which was a big part of the NFL for a lot of years. Well, it's a different era now. You have to evolve, and you just wonder, is he going to be a bit too conservative in his approach, and how does that affect the quarterback position? Now, he did bring in Mike McCoy, who was the head coach for the Chargers and the offensive coordinator for the Broncos when they had Peyton Manning. And of course, with the Chargers, he had Philip Rivers. So he's a West Coast offense guy, and he does a great job with quarterbacks. And, he kind of got screwed last year when he got ran out of Denver because they had no quarterback. They had no line that really wasn't on him. So I think he'll do a great job there. And it's going to be interesting to see the relationship he builds with Wilks and see if Wilks basically turns him loose and says, okay, we've got a couple veteran quarterbacks. We got a first-round quarterback. Let's see what you can do. Now, defensively, Wilks, he's going to have a lot of control over the defense. But again, you lose Tyrann Mathieu. You wonder how that's going to affect things. They do have some aging players on defense. And then offensively, that's kind of my main thing is, if a mediocre line, they still have David Johnson, they still have Larry Fitzgerald, but offensive line play and quarterback, those are things that are, common themes in this league. And if the line is hit or miss, and the fact you don't have very mobile quarterbacks, that's gonna affect your season. That could be the difference between my 5-11 prediction and possibly 9-7. Maybe getting the playoffs or just barely missing. So they take Josh Rosen, 10th overall. Surprisingly, he was the fourth quarterback off the board despite being the 10th pick. You signed Sam Bradford to a one-year deal in the offseason. We all know about him being made of glass and being kind of an average quarterback. And then Mike Lennon signed to a 2-year backup level deal. So he's just going to be, second string all the way. But, it's going to come down to Bradford and Rosen. And, I think a lot of it's going to be up to Wilks, because if he feels that the Cardinals are truly a contender this year, he might go with Bradford. He might go with the veteran quarterback week one. And, obviously with Bradford's injuries, even if he starts week one, he could be done for the season before the end of that first game. But if Wilks really trusts the veteran and really feels that they can make a run to the playoffs with a veteran quarterback, then he's going to go Bradford. But if he's a little bit more realistic in his expectations, maybe he starts Josh Rosen right away. Josh Rosen is probably about as NFL ready as any quarterback in this year's draft, as any rookie coming in here. And he played in a West Coast offense in college, pro-style quarterback, strong arm, really more accurate than his completion percentage in college showed. But, nonetheless, he has a lot of the NFL traits and tools, very smart as far as knowing the playbook. But at the same time, he's a guy that, has some personality type issues. He's a kid that grew up with some money, and he kind of comes across as entitled, very opinionated, and he's not afraid to speak his mind. And with franchise quarterbacks, you really don't want those guys saying all kinds of different things in the media, especially with the social causes, because we've seen how things have gone with the national anthem and different things like that, how players get involved with that, how the league and the teams react. So especially with your quarterback, you really want him to be a little bit quiet off the field. That's not Josh Rosen's personality at all. But the big thing with Rosen is durability, and there's also questions about his love for the game. How much does he love football? His body language, his lack of leadership. It's very Jay Cutler-like, and on the field it's kind of Cutler-like too, because he's a guy that he can throw 4 touchdowns one week and look like the best quarterback around, and then the next week he throws 3 or 4 picks and looks like the other type of goat, Billy Goat. So he's a guy who can play week 1, and I think they should probably play in week 1, but like Sam Bradford, he's made of glass, and sadly, he's a 21, 22-year-old kid coming out of college, whereas Bradford, he had that injury, that collarbone, I think it was, at Oklahoma, but generally the injuries really didn't start setting in until second or third year in the league. And Rosen, you're talking about a guy that's probably as injured as, or perhaps has the worst durability of any top quarterback prospect, first-round quarterback prospect ever, or definitely, top 3 all time. I'd have to go back and look at other examples, but offhand, I mean, he's definitely a guy that, he can't stay healthy. He missed half of his sophomore year, missed a couple games last year, but remember, that was 2 concussions that he had within a month, and the second concussion forced him to miss his bowl game, which was like 32 days later. Now, meaningless bowl game, and I think that was a big part of the reason why I think he actually just kind of chose to sit out, which I don't blame him. But nonetheless, I mean, this is a guy that isn't particularly mobile or that athletic. He's a full-on pocket guy. He's a guy that needs to have a great line pretty much at all times, and the Cardinals have had a very spotty line. So, like Bradford, one hit could be it, could take him down for the season. So, I think Arizona, they need to temper the expectations, because you just don't know what you get out of Rosen as a rookie, assuming he plays most of the year. Bradford, though, gave him a 1-year deal worth $20 million, so you kind of feel obligated to at least start him the first few weeks maybe, and that's going to be a weird situation with him, and then you're going to bounce back and forth with him and Rosen, and you just don't know how healthy either one of them is going to be. So I think the quarterback play, the offensive line play being hit or miss, I think you have to expect a little bit of a rebuild in Arizona. So another team that could make a run at 8 or 9 wins, but I say probably 5-11. So yeah, the Rams, class of the West, possibly the class of the NFC, and possibly the NFL. We'll see, but I just think the Niners have by far the best chance to give them a run. The Niners could upset them, but again, I mean, you also have to factor in even the non-divisional schedule. So I think the Rams are going to repeat as NFC West champions. Niners are going to come up a little bit short of the playoffs in Seattle and Arizona. Whether they want to admit it or not, they're in a rebuild. Simple as that. So, yeah, that's my NFC West preview. Again, go to thesugarhuddle.com to read more of my articles. Like I said, each week I'm going to preview one division per week, probably the AFC West this week coming up. But, yeah, each week I'm going to preview each division. Each team gets an individual preview. And I'm going to post more videos here on my YouTube channel, Eric Murray. So, yeah, look out for that. And like I said, go to thesugarhuddle.com and check it out. So, thanks. Take care.